Na hastalu gori svijeća, ti si draga moja sreća.
The story begins with Yugoslavia. You had 6 countries together. Now, those 6 countries were totally different by language, by culture, by nationality, everything. By religion mainly, too. So, basically, you had 6 countries that only one man could put together, and that man is still the really, really big man here, and that was Tito. So, basically, in that period, he was the only man who could economically and politically put those 6 countries together. Now, after his death, and that was in 1980, Yugoslavia kind of started to go weaker and weaker. So this is basically the street where you had the first barricades when they were trying to enter the city, where they killed most of the people and things like that. But in that period you couldn't see so many cars or anything going through the streets. We were kind of rat people, if you know what I mean. We were kind of living in the ground, you know, in the shelters, in the basements and things like that.
You know, I was still going to school. I was secondary school. I was just finishing my high school, you know, and war started. So we thought it was going to end soon, but obviously didn't. And we had, it was 1992, and then we had a whole year, almost a whole year, doing basically nothing, just fighting and trying to, you know, make any sense of what was going on. And then eventually they called you up, you had to join this initial training and you become part of.
So you had to?
Military forces. Yeah, you had to. You had no choice.
Neki stari razlozi sad su tako nevažni, sad su tako daleki. Ne mogu ti ništa osim srca dati, osim svoje ljubavi.
We're going to see the Sarajevo tunnel. Actually, Sarajevo is known for 3 things. 2 of them are unfortunately, and 1 of them is just joyful. So those 2 that are so wrong for us were actually the assassination of the Prince Ferdinand, something that kind of triggered the First World War, and the second one is actually the war. And the one good thing is the Olympics, actually. The Olympic Winter Games in 1984. This is the map of the Sarajevo. Usually we show, you know, the title because it's kind of ironic, you know, you have the Olympic City, surrounded city. And this is like almost 4 years of the end of the siege, because Dayton Agreement was in 1995, but for us the end of the war was actually 1996. Because that's the period when we actually felt safe and the Yugoslavian troops actually pulled from the mountains and everything else. So that's why we say almost 4 years under the siege, and you have over 11,000 of killed people. Now, over here you can actually see the main street, the Sniper Alley that we just passed. That's the point alley that I was telling you about. From the beginning of the city to the end of the city, you have that street. That's why it was so many times shot. Now, this over here, as you can see, it says Serbian forces. This is how we got surrounded. The airport is actually blue because it's a neutral zone. You have UN forces in the time when they make this map. This is what I was telling you about, free Bosnian territory. This from here is actually the city. This behind the airport, this is where we right now, over here. So right now we are on a free zone, on a place they call Butmir. In the beginning they actually enter in the city. So the first barricades in the city were actually near the Holdein. That's the first part that they actually tried to took. So they came from the mountains, and those were the first barricades. But as soon as we formed our police and everything, we kind of focused our whole city on that part. So basically they returned on the hills. So we just kind of stayed occupied, but they were not in the city.
We are now at the moment on the front of the tunnel. Actually, this is the tunnel entrance during the war. This was a place where lots of food went in, you know, and through the tunnel in the city, lot of munition, many people, you know. And now this is just an entrance into 25 meters of the tunnel that my family saved after the war. The airport, before UN came, Serbians controlled the airport. UN made special agreement with them to use the airport for delivering of the humanitarian aid for people of Sarajevo, and after that Serbs moved through because UN practically accept their conditions, you know, and one condition was that Serbians also getting food from UN, another one was that we cannot use the airport for any purpose, but UN couldn't stop us really to use the airport. But many people died at the airport trying to run across the airport during the night, you know, before tunnel was built. That was one more reason why tunnel was built, you know. But main reason was transport of the weapons from this side back to the city for defense of the city, because UN was not guarant of our safety.
The tunnel is something that we call engineer miracle. You have, like, in the winter time, you have water to your knees and you have electricity over your heads and everything, but we never had any accidents. This is kind of something that we call wheelchairs. This is something that was actually going through the tracks that you saw in the tunnel. If you have, like, really a lot of food or everything else, they would put it on this. Like, our president actually was on these wheelchairs going through the tunnel. My first memories about the war are these wheelchairs. It was in 1994 and my father was a military, so he actually took me over there to buy something of food, and I remember myself like kind of squashed here in these wheelchairs, and my father is actually pulling these wheelchairs with like 50 kilos of potatoes on his back, and I was over there sitting with a package of the chewing gum in my, like, really huge package, like you have 100 of them in that package, and I was like keeping them really close. That was so important. I was the coolest chick in town with a package of the bubble gum, because nobody had a bubble gum in that period.
Tunnel was thing that saved Sarajevo, definitely. Without tunnel we would have here probably Srebrenica before Srebrenica, if you understand what I want to yes, a lot of people were killed there, you know. That was city which had maybe 50,000 people, you know, 20% of them were killed, you know. You know how much is 20% of 300,000 people. That would happen here, you know. Also, Serbians were not afraid, you know, of anything or anybody, you know. If we couldn't stop them, nobody would stop them, you know. At that time we had that feeling, you know, and I think, you know, it was good feeling, you know. That's why we had to find way how to continue our defense and how to stop them, and the only way was digging tunnel and bringing weapons.
Spent more than in the Marshall Plan in Europe after war, but something didn't work from the economic point of view probably, and this opened the way to the social and political crisis maybe, and What do you think went wrong with this international aid? Something didn't work probably because there is a kind of now they are trying to use NGOs and civil society as a magic card to solve problems that they did not solve with the traditional economic and political intervention. And I couldn't understand what really went wrong.
Well, I don't know. You know, people say that Dayton was best solution at that time. Not perfect one, but maybe, you know, to provide a solid basis for, you know, future development. However, nobody ever touched anything about Dayton since then, and there was, you know, there's so many things that, you know, need to be changed. Just overnight, we had to face, you know, reconciliation, economical development, all these other issues at the same time, and that's not easy for a small country, and, you know, such as Bosnia, a complicated country such as Bosnia-Herzegovina.
And the big international institutions, I mean, they have different fashions at different times about what needs to be done, and they don't always agree with each other. So maybe the World Bank is saying something different from the UN, something different from the European Union, and Bosnia just, you know, gets confused, I think, and a lot of the aid was conditional. You know, we give you this aid, but you have to do privatization, you have to do this, you have to do good governance, and conflicting messages, and sometimes just demanding things that Bosnia wasn't ready for. As I was saying, a new state going through a huge transition, recovering from war, and some stuff just wasn't really realistic, and I think people signed the agreements to get the money, but without really buying into.
The Dayton Agreement was made to stop the war, and it did the job. The war ended, and we're all happy for that. But 12 years on, it's obvious that it's not completely working, because the progress has been slow. Any improvements that have been made have been pushed or imposed by the international community. There is just this sort of democracy that exists but is not actually in place. And what needs to be done, in my opinion, is to somehow adapt, adjust this agreement, which is now our constitution, to the reality.
This is a country that fosters conflict because ethnopolitics rules exclusively on generation of crisis and conflict. And that's why, to me, it is cynicism from the international community when they come here and say, oh, but you people vote for these people, why don't you vote for some? You cannot vote for anybody else, because whoever you vote for must play the rules of the ethnopolitical game.
Well, I think, as you know, Bosnia-Herzegovina has been, for centuries, a place where different nations, different people live together, and I cannot see Bosnia-Herzegovina in any other context. My personal perception is that I'm proud of our mixed communities here in this country, despite of the conflict and all the outcomes or the consequences we are still actually facing and dealing with. I think that the future of Bosnia-Herzegovina lies in living and working together, and we need maybe more to invest in understanding and learning from each other.
Basically, when you talk about divided societies, it usually goes like this. You have a lot of different peoples, like different cultures, and now we have to adjust their differences to find such a legal framework that would, you know, enable all these different people to articulate their. Here it's the other way around. You have, you know, pretty much same people, you know, divided only by religion. Now we have to maintain the level of production of difference, of cultural difference, and then to refer to these differences as things in the world. In order to have healthy public space, you have to have a possibility to lead a dialogue. There is no dialogue if oh, you are a Croat, oh, I know what you will say, and, you know, I immediately dismiss you as my dialogue partner. Let's go back to Schmidt. Here, ethnopolitics resides on distinction enemy and friend. What we need for democracy is to turn enemy into adversary. We need to respect the enemy, and he or she will become our adversary. This will be the end of ethnopolitics. That's why it's very important to keep it, however, on lower level. Nobody wants to fight anymore with the weapons, but to maintain the level of hatred, to maintain the level of animosity, or actually to maintain the other in the status of enemy. That's important, theoretically speaking.
When it comes to national communities or ethnic groups, if you like, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think it's a very complex situation still. Even though the war in Bosnia ended, well, over 12 years ago, I think still many issues have not been resolved. And today we have ethnic groups or national communities who all have the status, the three main ones have the status of constituent groups. So according to the constitution, they are all equal. But when you think about it in practical terms, this is not the case for every ethnic group in every part of this country. And unfortunately, I think the mistrust between peoples in this country still exists, and the wounds of the war have not healed entirely. And what's worse, in my opinion, is that this reflects very much on younger generations.
Kada dođe zima I prve pahulje, čekat ću te moja buco, kraj prve gimnazije. Čekat ću te moja buco, kraj prve gimnazije.
The situation is that we have a big population of young people and we are doing many things. I go to Banja Luka, I have friends there, and we do things. You know, to us it doesn't matter. I don't care about this stuff that political are saying, you know, that is problem in Bosnia. It's not a problem. The problem is that they don't give us a chance. That is main problem. If they give me a chance, believe me, this country will be, I don't know, Holland, next Holland, in my opinion. And we have many organizations, NGO, you know, and they do good stuff. But it's not, you can see that anywhere. They don't want that people know that we do that stuff.
Unfortunately, one of the key problems regarding civil society in Bosnia and Herzegovina is that we do not have civil society. Furthermore, I wrote about these things, but furthermore, I think that we cannot have civil society because of the legal and political framework which follows ethnical divides. Almost every association that come out in public space is immediately encoded and interpreted as ethnic. For example, if your organization comes from Sarajevo, then immediately you will be interpreted as Bosniak ethnical civic association. If you go out in the field, you will see a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of organizations that simply cannot have their say in public space, in media that are controlled by ethnopolitical parties. And that's why I think we have a very big crisis regarding civil society.
I was on a seminar in Parliament about building stronger society. And I was like this, why is that bad? I don't know why it's bad that we have our organizations and help. They said that we do that only because of money. But why?
And they do that because of power.
I'm young, I need money. And I will do something good, and
I don't know, travel somewhere, maybe get some money, learn something, I don't know. No, that is bad. We wash money like that. I don't know, it is catastrophe.
The problem is that we live in a country where collectivist right dominate over individual human rights. Practically any issue brought in parliament by a certain amount of ethnic representatives can be considered as the issue of vital national interest. So, in other words, we do not have efficient mechanisms of implementation of individual rights because we are dominated, because collective rights are is what matters politically. We need such a framework where individual rights will matter politically as well as collective rights. That's what we don't have.
I think, as I just pointed out, I think all of us in this country, we all have to really work much harder to achieve, to actually create this solution ourselves. I don't think any solution can be, implemented or given to us. I think we have to create that solution for the situation in our country. And that, I think, my advice to maybe younger generation is to, work hard, to study hard, and to actually be open to each other, to learn more from each other. And this is how we, I think, will get to a long-term solution for our country. We cannot allow ourselves to live in ignorance, which is often what creates misunderstanding and lack of appreciation for others, for different, and so on.